All right, so this is one of the more odd interviews. We're in bed here in San Francisco at the Elise. And guess who's in bed with me here? It's Trevor from Model 3 Owners Club.
Hey guys.
Hey, we were just hanging out together at the Fremont factory on the VIP factory tour. And now we get to interview him, which is great.
Pretty cool. Thanks for having me on the show. It's awesome.
Yeah. All right, so we just got back from the Franz question and answer. How would you feel about that?
It was fun, but you know, it's not like we've heard a lot of the same kind of stories all over again.
Yeah, I mean, he had taken all of our questions and then, you know, I guess cherry-picked ones, but they didn't, it seemed like with a room full of people, he could have cherry-picked some.
I was actually surprised that it actually did take questions from the audience because, you know, we were led to believe that wasn't going to happen. So
right.
We were both quite fortunate. We both were able to get up and ask a question and stuff. So
yeah, now your question was about Model 3, and he avoided that like the plague.
Yeah. They're not ready to talk yet, so we'll have to wait another month.
I thought James brought up a good point about the fact that Franz can't just cherry pick and answer one question for us in the room because they're a publicly traded company.
Exactly.
So
yeah. If you're going to release the info, you have to do it all at once.
It has to be
and it has to be official.
Right.
Sure.
So did we really learn anything about the Model 3 at all today? Like anything even
other than how bloody gorgeous the car is?
It is. I mean, let me just say. So we were in the room with a Model 3. That's an early prototype.
It is the silver alpha prototype that they had at the reveal event last year, and it's the same one they've been trotting around.
That many people have taken pictures of and seen.
Yeah,
right?
But seeing it in pictures and seeing it in person,
totally different.
Totally different.
Yeah, I mean, it still has the effect that a Model S has, you know, like on you. It doesn't. It's not like because it's a cheaper car somehow that it lost its luxury to me.
It
like
does not look like a $35,000 car.
No.
It looks. I'm telling you. I mean. Like I said, seeing it in person, it just totally cements in your mind that they've done a stunning job on the design of this car. I mean, I was looking at it from every angle, trying to glean something.
Yeah, you were like walking it. You were pacing it off.
Yeah, I was pacing it off, trying to get some ideas of the way. Well, we know how long the car is, but we were trying to figure out how wide it was. So I kind of paced that out a little bit, and once I get a chance to measure my feet and stuff, that'll give me a better idea how big the car is and stuff. But you know what, in all honesty, I was looking at it from a lot of different angles, and there's a few things that I noticed, like the greenhouse on the top of the car is taller than a Model S, even though the height of the car is about the same.
Really?
Yeah. So
you think there's going to be more head height? Like,
oh yeah, there's definitely, yeah. Well, one of the things I noticed too is that the first crossbeam member over here looks like it's pushed a little further back than it is on the Model S. So I think the visibility, at least from this side, because I like to have the seat up on my car a little higher. So I find that sometimes when I test drove the Model S, that was coming down a little bit low, and but the one thing that I did see very clearly is because they had a Model S right next to it, you could compare the cars.
Right.
And I think that was pretty deliberate. But the dash height is so much lower. You just look at the cars and you can really see how much lower the dash is.
Oh wow!
And the windshield comes down much further, so the front view out of the car should be amazing.
Oh, I'm glad you noticed that, because when I'm sitting in an S, I feel like I'm down in a cockpit and I'm kind of struggling to see over.
Yeah, I think this is a good compromise. I mean, it's not an SUV where you're sitting up higher, but I think it'll give you that same effect. Based on the dash being quite a bit lower, and of course everybody's comment is, what does the interior look like? Well, it's the Alpha. We've seen the pictures,
right? And
I don't think it's any different as far as that's concerned with the production cars. Tesla's pretty honest with their design so far. It's been this is what we're putting into production.
So you don't think there's going to be a big shift? Like the nose is probably going to look like that.
No, minor tweaks and stuff that unless you see the Alpha prototype and you compare it side by side, I don't think you'd be hard pressed to see any differences between the cars.
Interesting. Now, when we went on the tour today. The part of the tour that was, well, I mean, it was very reminiscent to me of what we saw 10 months ago. Except that it was a lot more activity than I saw then. But you were much more perceptive than I was. You were mentioning to me that you saw some goings on early in the tour for the Model 3 section.
Well, I don't know how much we're allowed to talk about, but I definitely saw some activity happening in a larger area of the factory for the Model 3 line. There's definitely a lot of stuff going on.
Which is to be expected. I mean, even Elon talked about the fact that it blew his mind, and that there's so many more robots. I mean, robots just everywhere you look. It's incredible.
Yeah. The one thing that I did get a little bit of a peek, and I'm not going to say what I saw, but it's definitely a lot busier than the usual line. So we'll leave it at that.
That's awesome.
When Tesla's ready to talk, they'll talk, but it looks very impressive. So.
Yeah, I mean, I would say just not knowing anything about how factories work, that it seems like we're on schedule for whatever release they think they can do. It didn't look like they were rushing to do anything, making up time.
It was certainly beehive. I saw a lot of construction workers and stuff, so it's definitely, they're working on it for sure.
I think there's kind of two segments to the Tesla market. There's these, the luxury car market, which is obviously what they're in right now, and then the Model 3 is, to me, the average people, me, like you, who can afford a car that isn't, 100,000 plus. And I don't think a lot of the people who buy the S's and X's, for the most part, especially the ones that are upper, really understand fully what the big hype is about the Model 3. I mean, you do. You're talking about it all the time. But I just think there's a lot of people who don't quite get that yet. Tell me about what you think of the kind of the average Model 3 buyer.
I think the average Model 3 buyer who has a good head on his shoulders will realize that this is not a Model S or a Model X. I mean, this is an effort in cost reduction, but it certainly looks like they've taken the Tesla DNA from the design, and hopefully the drivability will be the same. In a car that's way more affordable, that still looks like $1 million. I mean, I think a lot of people are really going to have to get past the fact that it's a much simpler design on the interior, and Franz, of course, had talked at great length about their overarching reach to take away all of the extraneous stuff in the car to give us more of a serene type of interior and stuff. So it reminded me more of a Bauhaus type of design. And I think in a lot of ways it's actually a very refreshing take on doing an interior. I remember during the days of the Model X, when they showed the initial prototypes, they had a simplified interior as well, of course, but I think it probably was a little too soon. But now they're certainly going full throttle on it on the Model 3. So I'm looking forward to it, and I know a lot of people making comments about the spaceship interior. Let me tell you, when you see how simple this interior is and how modern it looks, there's your spaceship interior, folks. It looks great.
Yeah, I mean, because we were all expecting on one side maybe the Millennium Falcon buttons and knobs, that would be spaceship, but no, I mean, this is just really sleek.
Yeah, I think, well, the thing you mentioned about all the buttons and stuff, I think that's most people's idea of luxury. More buttons equals more luxury, but they're taking a completely different, like more of an Apple approach to things. Take away everything that's extraneous and just give you a very simple, elegant looking, modern take on a car. So it's not going to be for everybody, of course. But when you see the car, you might change your mind.
It might grow on you, right? I mean, there's a lot of people who it's so different that you have to sometimes get used to new things, and then you ever notice that, like, after a while, you things that you thought looked foreign to you now are just, they're natural.
I think it's just a natural progression of things. Like, we humans don't like change all that much, but when we get used to something, it happens. I mean, look at cell phones. I mean, everything looks like an iPhone today, whereas before the iPhone, it was all buttons.
There's buttons, exactly.
Right, so Tesla's kind of taking the same approach, I think, in a lot of ways.
Now, I mean, Franz even mentioned this today in the question and answer. He said that the problem with many cars is after a year or two, the interior looks dated. And there's nothing you can do about that because there's buttons and stuff that you can't move.
Yeah, this interior will not look dated right away because it just looks like nothing else on the market. So,
and they can keep updating the GUI interface all they want.
Yeah, that's a given. I think that's one of the things that people are looking at the simple interior and they're forgetting about the fact that you get software updates. So the car is going to get better over time, at least from a user interface. It may not be perfect when they first get it out, but it's something that's going to evolve over time and stuff, especially with the self-driving, the autopilot technologies built into the car. So
now you're really in touch with a lot of people who are focused on the Model 3 all the time. What are you hearing from your fans about what they've seen so far? Because there've been a lot of sightings and videos on the road. What are they saying?
Well, the opinions run a lot of gamut. You got people that are in the middle, and you got people who love it, and you got people who hate it and they want to cancel the reservations because they don't like a bolt in a particular place. I mean. You get the whole comments, but I think by and large the people that are really interested in the car really appreciate what they're trying to do. Now, whether that's the ecological aspect or the performance aspect or the design aspect, for me it's everything. But I'm really looking forward to it. I mean, really seeing the car in person really cements that this is a real thing. And, I'm very, very happy. I mean, I don't care what color I get it in at this point. It looks so good.
Now, you were mentioning to me something I didn't really fully understand. In Canada, there's different provinces for those American viewers. And in your province, there's a huge incentive, not even a tax incentive, really, I guess. What would you call it?
It's a real rebate in the real sense, meaning you get a check in the mail.
So it doesn't matter what you earn.
No.
Whereas the U.S. federal credit that we would get depends, everyone says $7,500, but you have to earn enough money to have paid enough money to get that credit back. You're talking about, doesn't matter what you earn.
Everybody qualifies.
And, I mean, say that number again.
Up to $14,000.
That is a lot of credit back on a car that costs $35,000.
Well, U.S.
Right.
U.S. With us, the exchange rate is not favorable
1-to-1,
for us right now.
Right.
So we expect the car to come in, in the mid to upper 40s.
Okay.
Before you add your options. So, but the $14,000 certainly helps. And unlike the U.S., it's not tied to a certain amount of cars. It's a fund, and it's fully funded until 2020. So I'm sure plenty of people will be able to get the rebate.
That's awesome, because everyone's been talking about, if I'm not in the list already, I'm not going to get that $7,500. But it doesn't matter.
It's not an issue for us. So.
Wow. That might be a reason to move to Canada. I'm just saying.
I will say something about incentives, though, and I try to repeat this to most people. An incentive is an incentive to get people's behavior to change, to get you to consider something that you wouldn't normally consider. It's not a reward.
Right.
So it's just like light bulbs. We had a big incentive to get people to get into LEDs, and so you can get these rebates and stuff to get people to change.
Right.
Because as with anything new technology is more expensive. So if you can get people to consider something with an incentive to get them to look at it, that's great. But eventually the incentives are not needed anymore, because once the prices come down, then you're not really required it. So in a few years, when we see more manufacturers come out with more product to choose from, and the prices are lower, then you don't necessarily need the incentives, and they can be phased out.
Right. Yeah. So it won't be there forever, but it's to get the people to early adopt and to start spreading the word and showing it. Because if you see a Model 3 on your block, I can promise you're going to go ask some questions.
My neighbors are all jealous. They all know that I'm waiting for this Tesla, and when it actually happens in my driveway, I'm going to get a lot of looky-loos.
Are you going to give test drives and stuff with people?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. When I had the loaner, I took people around the block. and they're all ooh.
That's awesome. Because Franz was talking about that today. I think he threw out the number so there's a lot of Tesla owners and stuff in the room. I thought he said that 2,500 Teslas have been sold by the people telling their friends. It's telling friends that makes the difference.
Yeah, well, it's part of our viral thing, but the proof is in the pudding. What it takes is a test drive. Yeah, and that's what cements it. That's all it takes. You can talk Tesla, EVs all day long, but when you take them for a drive, boom.
But let me ask you about this, because you have been preaching Model 3 for forever, and yet you obviously haven't driven a Model 3, but you got to drive a Model S recently.
I've driven several Model S's and several Model X's as well.
What were your thoughts on driving the Model S?
I think it's a great car. The instant acceleration is fun. Unless you've driven an EV, you just don't understand what instant acceleration is. There's a lot of cars, gas cars on the market, that can do 0 to 60 in 6 seconds or less. But it's different when you got a car that you get that acceleration right from 0 at a standstill. And also get the power at any speed. You can be doing 60, 70 miles an hour on the highway, and it's still there, and you don't have to downshift or anything like that. So that's a very different experience. And what it does, I think, in a lot of ways, it heightens the experience of the vehicle. And all-wheel drive may not be necessary if you need acceleration. Like a base Model S that I drove was a non-performance, non-ludicrous, basic 85 kilowatt hour battery pack in it. It had plenty of punch at whatever speed I was driving at. So, and of course now we know with the cell sheet that came out that at least the base Model 3 performance will be 5.6 seconds. That's plenty.
Yeah, that is plenty. Now, your Model S that you drove had Autopilot. Was this one of the first times you drove?
Yeah, it was my first time trying a car with Autopilot, and it was version 1 Autopilot, not the 2. But
And what did you think?
I loved it. It was great. I think it's a really great value add. So if you're thinking about Autopilot, I would highly encourage you to look at it.
Now, when you did the first into Autopilot, were you a little freaky?
Well, my first test drive I ever did on a Model S, I found that it hugged the curve a little too much. I was in a lane with another car beside me, and I just felt it was a little too close, so I backed off a little bit. But my last test drive that I did, when I had it for a full long weekend, we were on the highway, and I turned it on, and it felt great. Personally, I felt that it drove in the lane a little bit tighter than what I was used to, but maybe that's just because I was unfamiliar with the car being so large and stuff. But it was great. I could see using this on long trips, on long straight trips, as long as you're paying attention, right? Be careful,
Hands
folks.
on the wheel, right?
Hands on the wheel.
No
and,
reading books.
No, it was really nice. I found it to be very relaxing. You get used to it very quickly. You learn to trust it fairly quickly. But I was careful because I know that you're supposed to do the thing, and
Yep.
of course, you know, you see this, you know, the alerts that come up and stuff. But
Right.
no, definitely getting it. It's a good feature.
Yeah.
I like it.
And what about all these other car manufacturers who use, you know, 2020, we're going to have a Tesla killer? Do you think any of them really have something that could threaten the Model 3 in terms of sales?
Well, you know, Ken and I do our show too, and we follow it quite closely. And my personal opinion right now, out of anything that's really going to come onto the market, we're going to see a lot of activity from Volkswagen and Mercedes, I think, first.
Those are the two biggies?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think so. The Germans seem to be very interested in getting into this market. You know, in some cases, we're going to see higher end vehicles too, you know, more like Model S or Model X, and then they'll work their way down. I mean, you'll have the lower end stuff as well. But I think there's some good movement there. You know, we're seeing, you know, a lot of ways they're kind of latecomers. So that's why we're seeing this 2020, because, you know, you need 3 to 4 years to design a car and bring it to market.
But what about like the Leaf, which they're, you know, they kind of went back to the drawing table and are coming up with a 200-mile Leaf, they say.
Yeah. Well, the 200-mile is like kind of the minimum passing grade, I think, is what Elon has said in the past. So, you know, for people to really consider it as a viable car, it really needs to, minimum 200. You know,
because
200
that's when your
kilometers.
range anxiety kind of goes away. Is when you hit 200 miles. At least
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
what I feel.
exactly. And you know, don't forget, with a Model 3, you know, at that price point, you still have access to the supercharger network, which is not available on any other manufacturer.
Right.
So you have to take that into the equation a lot. And I think that's one of the reasons why the Teslas are doing so well, is because they've solved that problem, that you can do long distance in this car conveniently. Free in a lot of cases. We're fortunate in Ontario that the government's putting a lot of money into the kitty to actually put these fast charging DC stations all over the place. But they're not installations like superchargers where you get 8 stalls. It might be 1.
Oh, right.
Right, so it's a little different. But at least they're, I mean, it's a start. You have to start somewhere.
Exactly. Thanks
Awesome.
for hanging out. I
No
guess
problem.
we're going to be going to dinner soon.
Yeah, we're going to have
Seeing
some fun
some
again.
other cool YouTubers. It's just been fun hanging out with YouTubers today because I see you, to me, like, I'm a fan of yours.
And I'm a fan of yours.
And it's like, and then we're together. So that's really cool.
Yeah, it's really awesome.
It's great to have these events. Cool. Signing off.
See you guys.